Good day, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and today is September, I think it's the 8th. Yeah, it's the 8th. Welcome to The Pipeline. I'm joined today in the studio by Western Standard Alberta political columnist and host of the Cory Morgan Show, Cory Morgan.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad.
Good.
Not bad. Although stamps keep losing. I brought, they were playing the Elks, our illiterate animal friends from Edmonton.
Yes.
Yeah, and I brought my elk mating call to the game.
Did you call any in?
Luckily, no actual elks came at me. That's normally what I'm trying to do, is get the elks at me, but it didn't work. And of course, we're joined by Western Standard news editor Dave Naylor, who is out in beautiful British Columbia today. How you doing, Dave?
I'm good, guys. I was a bit worried there, Derek. You were going to make some sort of comment about the Edmonton cheerleaders.
I actually didn't. I didn't hear that. I had it.
You said something about Edmonton cheerleaders.
All I heard was something about cheerleaders.
Now I'm aroused.
Sorry, I was just thinking with your elk calling apparatus. I thought that's what you may be getting into. Just wanted to stop you.
Whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, if you could draw those across the field.
There we go. Today we're going to be discussing the rise of the People's Party, moving from a party that's been in the margin of error essentially in polls since it was created in the kind of the 1% to 2% range, really into an area now where it's easily surpassing the Green Party, matching or sometimes surpassing even the Bloc Québécois. So we'll be discussing what's happening with the People's Party. Very interesting story there. And tying that in, we're going to talk about the leaders debate coming up tomorrow. I should say the one English debate. We've had at least one or two French. There's another French one, and we're going to get one English debate tomorrow. But yeah, Maxime Bernier of the People's Party not invited despite their strength in the polls. Pretty interesting stuff. And we're going to be discussing Erin O'Toole's latest position on gun rights. Not one I'm a fan of. No. It's a real shame. But Erin O'Toole flip-flopping on gun rights. He's like a fish on the dock right now, different positions every day. One day his position's okay, one day it's just the same as Justin Trudeau. We're going to talk about that, what it could mean for the campaign. But before we get in, I want to thank all of our Western Standard members for your continued support. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, check out westernstandardonline.com and click on membership. You can try a membership free for 15 days for free. You can cancel at any time if you don't like that. It's just $10 a month or $99 a year to get you unlimited access to all Western Standard content. That gives you access to bailout-free Western media, owned, operated, and focused on Western Canadians. Check it out, westernstandardonline.com on membership. Try it free for 15 days. Today's show is sponsored by... Is Resistance Coffee still... No, Resistance Coffee is... we're done with our contract.
There's still good coffee. I'll give one last...
Still good coffee. Still good coffee. You know what? Let's just give them a freebie. Why don't you give them a shout out?
Well, just as our perhaps final goodbye to Resistance Coffee as a sponsor. We'll see. They may come back.
Hopefully we can renew them.
They are a cool coffee company. They're the unwoke coffee company. They do the counter-woke. They take a portion of your purchases and give them to things like the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. 10% goes towards that. They're actually giving some of your money to fight for your freedoms rather than, say, some betting companies and such to give your money to woke causes that are actually trying to oppress you. Plus, it's good coffee. They deliver it right to your door. Go to resistancecoffee.com. Check these guys out. They got some good coffee. They're a Western business, and they're worth your while.
Amen. All right, well, let's jump into it. We're going to begin with the rise of the People's Party, Maxime Bernier's party, really coming up in the polls. Dave, why don't you set the stage?
If you remember, Derek, before the election, Bernier was hosting rallies of, good half a dozen people, including one in Manitoba that he got arrested for during the COVID crackdown. Now he's drawing hundreds and thousands of people. He did a tour across the West last week, in which he started out in BC, and the crowds were fairly large. Then he ended up in Manitoba on a farmer's field, and there was, by some estimates, 5,000 people there. It just looked like a huge crowd. Obviously, his support is growing amongst the the non-vaccine passport crowd, which Bernier is firmly against. His popularity is rising across the country. In Alberta, he's taken over second place in some areas. In Quebec, I think there's a chance that he may even take his seat, which is an incredible increase when you think over the last 3 weeks, when he's gone from speaking to a small crowd, a handful of people, to literally thousands and thousands of people. He's really on an upward growth.
Cory, it's quite remarkable how much they've grown. I mean, the last election they were approximately 2%. They've been bumping around 1% to 2% in most polls since. Actually, a lot of pollsters even stopped polling for them. They were so low. Bernier has been largely ignored by most of the media for the last 2 years, but since the last election, I mean, he didn't have a seat, so he didn't have a place in the House of Commons. That really hurts your voice, and the leader not having a seat is a pretty tough spot for a lot of, obviously, especially newer and smaller parties. But now he's polling consistently. The lowest polls have him at 4, which is higher than the Green Party at 3. But most polls have him between 4 and 6. Some are even showing them growing towards 8. It's quite an increase. At this level, he actually would stand a chance of taking his seat back in Beauce in Quebec. I'd personally be surprised if they would win anything outside of that. But they, at 8%, they're probably going to get some second places in Alberta, maybe Saskatchewan, odd little pocket here and there across the rest of the country. What do you think is driving these numbers? I think it's probably fair to say the average PPC supporter hates Trudeau with the fire of 1,000 furies, but they're not voting Conservative, which is if your only goal is just to get rid of Trudeau, Conservative is probably the easiest way to do that. What do you think is driving this?
Well, and I mean, Maxime's run a very good campaign. It's surprisingly solid. He's crossing the country, speaking to people. He's consistent. He's a skilled, intelligent guy. So, I mean, it's not a fringe leader coming out of nowhere, and he's been around. He's a little more familiar this time to people. But the main thing is, the other parties created a base for him. Like, he didn't pull it in himself. They gave it to him. Every party now basically is supporting some form of essentially mandated or coerced vaccination. They're talking about passports. They're, people who are concerned about those things have nowhere else to turn, and the PPC is there saying we will not, without doubt. Like, they're saying clearly, we don't support that. We support individual rights, and that's a very motivated voter group. I mean, these are people who feel they have no other home. He's providing them one, and he's not drawing just from the Conservatives. The Greens collapsed, and I mean, I'm writing about that, but those had, your person who would go to the naturopath for their healing and things like that. And now it sounds like they might lose their job if they don't get a vaccination. They're cornered, and the Green Party obviously isn't going to help them any. So again, they're coming to Maxime Bernier. And then among traditional Conservatives, he's getting that as well, because O'Toole is pivoting farther and farther left all the time in response to everything, whether it's the carbon tax or the gun control and firearm rights. Again, he alienates little pockets of Conservatives every time he does that. And Maxime's happily pulling them all in. It's going to be interesting because momentum is everything. I mean, it's not like he's going to sweep and get a majority out of this race, but he is really on the move right now.
It does look right now as if there's only two parties with any momentum. The Conservatives with Erin O'Toole are, they've come from no chance of winning to, a very slim lead. As it is right now, I mean, they stand a small chance of winning the most seats, even though their vote's not very efficient. It's clustered in the West. Even though they've come down in the West, they were coming from such a high that the vote's still relatively inefficient. But they're nowhere near a majority government right now in most polls. Some polls have them a little closer.
No, like the way the votes lay out, we know that they need to significantly pass the Liberals in popular support in order to actually even win a minority government. And they're getting there, but they're not there yet.
Yeah, so the Conservatives got some momentum. Well, that appears to be perhaps stalling a bit.
Seems to have capped.
I mean, it may have hit a bit of a roof. The PPC, though, that they have had steady growth throughout. Obviously, they've got no chance of forming government, but a lot of people don't understand our own system. You don't actually vote for a government. You vote for a member of parliament. and the member of parliament actually votes for who is the government. I mean, the default is the biggest party gets to be that, but that's not actually how the system works. And I'd say probably less than 1% of Canadians genuinely understand how the system works. Dave, I know you're on the news side, but from your observations, what do you think is driving this? And do you think that support is going to hold up on election day, or do you think a lot of those people are just going to get scared of Justin Trudeau and kind of run back to the Tory mothership?
Yeah, we've still got 2 weeks to go, Derek, and 2 weeks is a lifetime in politics. I think it's purely being driven by vaccine hatred. You've seen these crowds building over the years, over the last couple of years, and in Montreal they had tens of thousands of people marching in the streets last weekend against COVID passports. It's a huge groundswell of anger against these things that are basically being brought in across the country. British Columbia was the latest one to bring them in yesterday. And there is a good chunk of the population that hate these things, that vow to never take part in the program. And to me, that's what's driving Bernier's popularity at the moment. So whether that stalls or whether it increases, I think remains to be seen over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, let's then turn it towards the leaders' debate. I think that's a pretty easy segue. I think all three are pretty easy segues today. The first and only English leaders' debate is coming up tomorrow. Invited by the federal government's debate commission is Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, Bloc Québécois leader Yves something Blanchet, and Green leader Anna-May Paul, although Paul is running less. Of course, the Bloc leader doesn't run a national campaign. Of course, he runs a campaign in Quebec, as expected. But at least he's moving around and doing stuff. But the Green leader, Anna-May Paul, has not left her downtown Toronto constituency once that we're aware of in the entire campaign. She is invited, and she is in some polls running at half of the popularity of the People's Party right now. Yet Maxime Bernier is not invited. Of course, the Maverick Party is not invited, but their popularity is, I think, maybe we're gonna have to talk about them at some point here. But the Maverick Party has seemed to have kind of failed to really catch much traction. They're not really catching on with voters right now. That kind of discontented vote across Canada, but particularly in the West, seems to be going more to the People's Party. So obviously Maverick is not invited, but even Maxime Bernier is not invited. Dave, what's the reasoning behind that? Why do you think? Why is it that Maxime Bernier has been excluded from the leaders' debate, and what can we expect tomorrow?
Well, the committee that oversees this said they have a set policy on who they invite. Obviously, the Prime Minister and the opposition parties get in. You have to have a seat in Parliament, which is the big thing that's keeping Bernier out. And they have a list of their own criteria that Bernier at the time failed to meet. I think if they had gone back 2 more weeks or gone ahead 2 more weeks, they may have reconsidered it and let him in. But the Canadian federal debates they're hit and miss. There are some that produce a punch, a good punchline, like was it Mulroney and the "You Sir Had a Choice" to John Turner over his patronage appointment.
Can we talk about a single debate once anywhere in the media that's not the Mulroney Turner "You Had a Choice" debate? That is the go-to for absolutely every Canadian. It is such an exception. Debates in Canada suck.
They do, and that was my point. That's the only one you can think of, and how many years ago was that? The debates in Canada are a terrible format.
I wasn't born.
That just don't allow a good debate. They should be limited to maybe 3 people maximum to try and get some back and forth going between the political leaders. But the way they've got it now, it's just a mess. And for me, the biggest travesty is the English debate tomorrow night. They're not going to talk about foreign affairs. And what was the biggest question during the first 2 weeks?
What could be going on?
What was the biggest question during the first 2 weeks of the campaign? It was the Liberals' mess in Afghanistan. And Trudeau calling the election the day the country fell back into the hands of the Taliban. And all the some Canadian citizens and Afghans who helped Canadians now stuck there. It was an absolute mess. But guess what they're not talking about tomorrow night? Afghanistan. And to me, that's a disgrace, Derek.
Cory, this is actually only the second time in Canadian history there's been any actual rules around who gets into a debate or not. Normally it's just been a consortium of media and they get to pick who's in or not. It's very ad hoc. I remember when I was in politics, they literally changed the rules to keep me out from about 40 years of precedent. But Alberta had no debate commission. I actually don't have that much of a problem with there being a debate commission. But the rules have got to be fair around it. And the debate commission seems to get to make up its own rules for who gets in and who does not. I mean, obviously, if it's just done by the media, then that actually gives the big party leaders more say about who gets in or not. Because then Aaron O'Toole could say, well, I'm not going to go if, Bernier or Maverick is there. I think it's actually good to take it out of the hands of the politicians to decide. They shouldn't get to decide who they get to debate. But it's inherently, I think, a tough task. I mean, are we going to invite the Rhinoceros? I'd actually like to see the Rhinoceros Party there, but it's probably not a very serious thing if you're going to have a decent debate. Are we going to have there's like 50 or 80 registered political parties out there. You can't invite every single one. Otherwise everyone gets 10 seconds and no one's going to bother watching the thing. But do you think the debate commission is out of line in excluding Bernier here? Or do you?
I don't know. I mean, just in the hindsight, seeing how much support he's gaining, I think it would have been worthwhile to have him in because clearly he's representing. I mean, when you're looking at 8%, that's millions of Canadians. That's worth them seeing what he's talking about. But they did set some criteria weeks ago, and they made it public. It wasn't a hidden, shadowy thing. And as far as anybody could tell at that time, he didn't meet the bar. Kind of as Dave said, we don't get good debates because, when we did have 5 candidates in the other one, it's difficult to have a good exchange of ideas. It's difficult to have something that draws you in and draws your attention with that many people in a room. It's unfortunate that he got locked out of it, but I can kind of see that what happened here anyways. So,
well, I mean, if the goal is to keep the debate to a more manageable number, then perhaps what they should do is kick out the Green leader, who's running at about 2 or 3% and hasn't left her constituency.
If we can go in hindsight, she is adding nothing. She really is adding nothing.
PPC's even running more candidates than the Greens right now.
Their party is in such disarray. The reason she hasn't left her riding is her own party has defunded her. She can't afford to leave her own bloody riding. She's going to be there all alone.
Defund the leader.
Yeah. She's going to have no party mechanism supporting her. She will really... to be blunt, add absolutely nothing to the debate. Yes, if you could swap her for Bernier, I think it would make much more sense. I understand the hornet's nest if they tried at this point, but it would have been a much better debate for it and much more representative of people that are actually running in a serious campaign in this country right now.
Yeah. Okay, well, before we move on to the next segment, just a quick operating note for our team operating the cameras. Let's zoom in on screens when one screen's talking and shrink the other one down a bit so people can see a bit more since we're doing split screen today. Today's show is sponsored by the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. The CCFR is doing yeoman's work defending your right to own, use, and buy firearms safely in Canada. They are one of the important groups that are out there sometimes successfully getting parties to adopt good policies around firearms. I think groups like this actually had done a pretty good job with the Conservatives, but I mean, we're literally about to talk about this in a second. So I won't talk about it right now. But CCFR is one of the really good guys who are out there lobbying politicians, doing advocacy work on behalf of responsible and legal firearm owners, making sure that you have the right to own, use firearms safely in Canada. You should check them out. Go to firearmrights.ca and click Why Join to learn more about why you should become a member of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. I know I do. Fantastic group. You should all join it, even if you're not a gun owner. It's great stuff. Okay, well, that's super segue to our next segment. We did, the Western Standard editorial board did a review of the different parties' platforms. We went through the Conservative platform. I gotta say, there was not a lot that stood out that I liked. We had to grade that thing on a curb. But one of the policies in there that did okay was their policies around gun rights. If you're on the other side of the debate, you call it gun control. Gun control for me is just learning how to grip a pistol. But if you, we went through it, and it was no party is ever going to promise me the firearms policy I want. I understand that. So, being reasonable, we went through, I think, gave it a fair look. On firearms, we gave it a B. Aaron O'Toole, the Conservative platform, committed to undoing the arbitrary ban of 1,500 firearms in Canada that the Liberals called military-style assault weapons. Some of them, I was shocked to see were not banned. Panzerfaust anti-tank rockets, some Soviet anti-air missiles, AA missiles, like incredible stuff. I didn't know I could be shooting down Soviet attack helicopters like I was in 1980s Afghanistan. Incredible stuff, apparently, the Liberals.
There was a time that a yard wasn't a yard without a surface-to-air missile installation.
Back in the day, good times. But they also banned the Ruger Mini, the AR-15, which does not stand for Assault Rifle 15. I think it's Armalite rifle. But, try telling that to a Liberal. Banned this stuff just because it looks scary, yet virtually identical hunting rifles were not illegal. They just looked less scary. Ones that had like Grandpa's Woodstock, 30-06 or something. That's fine. But a virtually identical rifle that just had more of a black carbonite stock on it looks scarier. Banned. Aaron O'Toole said, no, that's ridiculous. We're going to undo that. Essentially going back to the status quo. But then in the French debate, the Justin Trudeau and the Bloc leader are going after him, and he says, I'm going to maintain the ban on assault weapons. And what he was doing there was trying to have it both ways. He was correct. He's going to maintain the ban from 1977, brought in by Trudeau the First, against actual automatic weapons. Anything that would be used by the military other than a sidearm was banned in 1977, the day really fun guns died. And that's what he technically meant, but I think he was trying to get away with sounding in French and in Quebec like he was more against guns than he was. And that ended up really muddling the waters and allowed the Liberals and the Bloc and the NDP to pounce on him, saying that he is going to repeal Justin Trudeau's ban on military assault weapons, which were not military assault weapons, other than the Panzerfaust, of course, which was always legal in Canada, So this is all a long way of coming around to Aaron O'Toole's epic flip-flop just the other day. Dave, tell us where we're at. What is Aaron O'Toole's gun policy as of 12:24 Mountain Standard Time today?
The bottom line, Derek, is I don't know. We've been on the air now for 24 minutes, and he may have changed it. But before we went online, his policy was basically the same as the Liberal one. It was only a matter of time before the Liberals grabbed their playbook and said, gun control, and threw it out onto the campaign trail. They obviously waited until they were behind in the polls and then threw it out with all sorts of hysteria that the blood will be flowing and running down the streets of Canadian cities because of what the Conservatives have got planned. And talking to Rod Gilatta, the head of the aforementioned CCFR, he said, basically said that O'Toole did the only thing possible. He sort of agreed just to get it off the table. And if you look at it, I think O'Toole was successful. I know you're going to disagree with me, Derek. I know you think guns are the be-all and end-all of the campaign, and it's the only issue out there. I'm going to disagree with you and say that it's not. I think that the Tories, what O'Toole said, basically did diffuse the idea. and certainly the media pack that follow the mainstream media pack that follow the leaders have moved on. They're not focusing on gun control for days on end like they used to. They seemed happy with O'Toole's answer, and have moved on to different topics now. I think they're on to the carbon tax and home equity taxes and other things. So Giltaca's assessment that O'Toole did what he had to do just to get it off the table, I think is correct. He said it was a typical ploy from the election playbook of the Liberals. It was expected. I'm sure the Tories expected it, and I think they dealt with it the best they could.
Well, I mean, it's one way to get it off the table. I don't know. If I was, I won't go there. It is one way to get it off the table. Capitulate, adopt the Liberal position, not talking about it anymore. It seems to me that there's another way to get it off the table, and that's not muddy the waters to begin with. Don't say one thing in English and another thing in French. Don't try to, don't try to have it both ways on absolutely everything. I think there was a way for O'Toole from the beginning to say, I am not ever going to legalize military assault rifles in Canada. But the Liberals have been lying to you. They've been misclassifying legitimate sport shooting and hunting guns, and I am not going to maintain their ban on legitimate, safe, legal firearms in Canada. But that would have required him, I think, to do it from the very beginning. Once he muddled that water, though, was there any way out of this other than capitulation?
Yeah, I think there still is. Standing on principle still has bloody room in politics. I'm sick of these guys turning and running as soon as they feel some pressure. That's the first pressure O'Toole's felt in this campaign. He's actually had it pretty good. He's been doing all right. And this, I'm sorry, but I'm sick of being lied to. That was in clear writing in your platform, not even the leadership, which you lied about when you talked about the carbon tax. You lied in your platform about repealing that bill, and you flip-flopped as soon as you got some backward pressure. And I'm sorry, you know what? You're a leader. That means you stand up and you explain your position then. You articulate it. If you're getting beaten over the head a bit with it, well, then you better figure out how to turn that around and clarify it, as you said. I mean, yes, politically, as Dave said, probably the right move when you're looking at the path of least resistance. But you know what? Just because it works doesn't mean it's right. And now, if you want to talk about, I bet you Maxime smiled as his support numbers went up. Sure, maybe only another 2%, 3%. It's not winning in the election, but those are points that come right out of the Conservative Party. There's a lot of Conservative supporters who are very dedicated to their firearms, whether for hunting, for hobby, for collecting, whatever reason. They're very dedicated on that issue, and there's no way they're going to vote for a man who now has said, we're just going to adopt Trudeau's position and commit to a review. That's kicking the can down the road. You know, I mean, he could have done a better way of this, and I have difficulty with this constant retreating. Then you're indistinguishable from the Liberals. I may as well vote for a Liberal who's honest about being a Liberal, which I won't.
Yeah, I don't know. It's damn disappointing. It was one of the few areas of the platform we could give the Tories decent marks. Already wasn't an A, it was a B. I mean, to get an A, you need to do things that I actually don't expect any party to do.
Light artillery.
I'm not asking for heavy artillery, just light howitzers.
Mortar.
I'd bring back the Panzerfaust. I'd really, no backyard collections with that.
For now, I would have been satisfied with just at least, again, sticking to repealing that policy. And hey, there's, and saying it was a reactive piece of policy to a terrible tragedy and mass shooting we had in Canada, which is extremely rare, thankfully. Mm-hmm. But and to say, we've got room, perhaps, there are some firearms that may need new categorization and may change, but the Liberals made a complete mess of that one, and we're going to start from scratch, and perhaps some new things are going to change. But
legitimate hunting rifles like Ruger Mini, just thrown in with machine guns that you'd see on an Abrams tank in Iraq, like just wild stuff.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and of course, thank all of our Western Standard members. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandardonline.com, click on membership. You can try it free for 15 days and cancel at any time. It's just $10 a month or $99 a year to get all access to all Western Standard content. bailout-free Western media. We've got a great team of journalists and opinionators, guys like Cory who just get paid. You just give your opinion.
Yeah. I'm not always right. Usually.
Sometimes. I'll talk to Jane. Yeah. Well, we got a great team working for you. You can get all access for $10 a month, $99 a year. Try it free for 15 days. Thank you very much all for joining us. Dave, keep safe in BC. We'll see you back here in Calgary soon. And Cory, keep your stick on the ice. Thank you.